Welcome to Twilight Fables, where fairy tales never sleep quietly. Tonight, we begin our descent into the twisted woods of Little Red Riding Hood. The shawl was waiting for her when she woke. Its crimson threads glowed faintly in the morning dim, as if they had soaked up the firelight overnight, and now breathed its dying warmth back into the air. Liora sat up slowly, eyes still heavy with the ache of dreamless sleep. Her fingers trembled when she touched the cloth. It was softer than she remembered, but colder, not from the breeze, from something deeper. It wasn't there when she went to bed. Downstairs, the kettle screamed. Liora stepped out of bed and wrapped the red shawl around her shoulders. It clung, not like wool, but like water, like a second skin. She tugged it tighter and stared into the mirror above her wash basin. The girl, staring back, wore her eyes, but someone else's mouth, too solemn, too old. She went downstairs. Her mother didn't look up as she poured hot water into 2 chipped cups. Steam curled around her weathered face, the same way smoke hugged the chimney at night. Her hands moved automatically. Sugar, milk, stir, without once acknowledging the shawl Liora now wore. "It's time," her mother said, placing 1 cup in front of Liora. "You're of age now. The path will open for you." Liora hesitated. "I thought the path was always there." Her mother's spoon stopped. Her jaw worked once before she said, "Only for those it recognizes." Liora glanced at the door. Frost edged the windows, despite the spring thaw. The fields beyond were just pale mist and bare trees, rising like brittle bones from the earth. She took a sip of her tea. It tasted faintly of ash. "Do I have to?" Her mother finally met her gaze. The eyes were hollow and tired, like something once alive had receded from behind them. "We all did," she said, "and we all came back, mostly." Liora wanted to ask what mostly meant, but she already knew. Everyone in the village had made the walk, every girl anyway. Always on their 13th spring, always alone. They carried a basket of bread and salt and black root. They wore the shawl, and they went to see grandmother. Not their grandmother, not really. The wailing forest stood just beyond the village's final fence. No one ever spoke its name aloud, only in whispers and warnings. Trees that bled sap the colour of rust, birds that mimicked voices, fog that never lifted. As Liora stepped beyond the gate, the world hushed. The sun didn't follow her in. Shadows stretched thin across the dirt path, and the air smelled of damp wood and rot and something sweeter, like bruised berries left too long in the sun. The shawl tightened around her shoulders. She walked. The path wound unnaturally, looping in ways that defied the map etched into her childhood stories. She passed trees older than the village itself, knotted with faces hidden in bark, mouths stretched wide in eternal screams or silent laughter. Liora pressed forward, though every step felt heavier. After what felt like hours, she saw the first symbol, a crescent carved into the side of a tree, pierced by an arrow of bone. It glowed faintly red, matching the threadwork on her shawl. She touched it, and the bark pulsed warm under her palm. Then it spoke. "Little one," it whispered, "how your heart beats, how your blood sings." Liora yanked her hand away, stumbling back. The tree shuddered, shedding a single black leaf. She did not touch another. Further along the path, The woods began to shift, no longer merely old. They felt aware. Roots moved behind her. Wind carried the sound of breathing that didn't match her own. She saw movement in the corners of her eyes, but when she turned, only stillness greeted her. She passed a deer with too many legs. It didn't run, it just watched, pupils wide and milky, breath misting the cold air. Something whispered her name, then a laugh, high and childlike, rippled through the trees. Liora! She broke into a run. The basket bounced against her hip, but she clung to it. She didn't know why. Maybe because it was the only thing in this place that was still hers. She ran until her breath turned ragged and her legs burned. And then, just like that, the trees opened. A small cottage sat in the clearing. Its roof sagged with moss, and its windows glowed faintly gold from within. Smoke curled from the crooked chimney. Vines with black thorns grew along the sides, pulsing faintly like veins. The door stood ajar. Her hand trembled as she knocked. No answer. She pushed it open. Inside, the room was warm, but not in a comforting way. The warmth clung too close, damp and suffocating, like being wrapped in a wet blanket. A fire crackled in the hearth, but it cast no shadows. "Come closer, little one," said a voice. "Let me look at you." Liora turned. Grandmother sat in a rocking chair near the fire. Her face was ageless, not in a youthful way, more like something carved from old wax and forgotten. Her eyes were yellow and wide, her teeth too many. She smiled like a knife. Liora didn't move. "You've brought the offering?" Liora nodded, holding out the basket. Grandmother didn't reach for it. "No," she said softly, "not that. The forest has other hungers." Liora stared. "I don't understand." "You will." The shawl suddenly pulled tight against her neck. Her knees buckled, her vision blurred. "I take only what is offered freely," Grandmother whispered, and then Liora remembered something, slipping. Not pain, not fear, a moment. Gone. She stood there afterward, still holding the basket, still breathing, but emptier. "What did you take?" she asked. Grandmother smiled wider. "A piece." Liora backed away. I want to leave." "You may," said Grandmother. "The forest allows it. This time." She turned her head toward the hearth. The flames whispered, and Liora thought she saw a face in them. Next time, wear the shawl tighter. Liora fled. Outside, the air was colder than before. The forest watched her leave. The trees didn't whisper now. They stared. The shawl no longer clung. It floated lightly over her shoulders, as though it had finished what it came to do. She walked, trying to remember what Grandmother had taken, but there was only a blank space in her thoughts, like a page torn from a book. When she reached the edge of the village again, the sun was just rising. She did not remember the night, but the forest had. The villagers did not ask how it went. They simply watched Liora return, their faces taut with expectation and relief. Though no one approached her, the red shawl around her shoulders, now duller in colour, was answer enough. A few women nodded, others quickly looked away. The baker's wife offered a loaf, but Liora declined. Her hands were still shaking. She crossed through the square, hearing whispers in the wind, none loud enough to decipher. When she reached her cottage, The door opened before she could knock. Her mother stood there, backlit by firelight. For a moment, she looked like grandmother. "You came back," she said, as though it were in doubt. "I think so," Liora replied. The shawl slid from her shoulders the moment she stepped over the threshold, folding into itself as if it were returning home. Her mother caught it before it hit the floor and tucked it away without a word. Liora said nothing. She climbed the stairs and slept for 2 days. When she awoke, things were off. The mirror in her room now showed only her face, never her eyes. The glass fogged when she got too close, though the air was cold. A crack appeared down the middle sometime during the night. She tried to remember what grandmother had taken, but it was like staring into water that never cleared. A void, a silence, something deeply important that had once lived inside her now gone. She asked her mother what she was like before the walk. Her mother looked startled. "I don't know," she said. "You've always been this way." Strange things began to happen after that. The cats in the village hissed when she passed. One scratched her without warning, leaving a mark that refused to scab. Children stared at her with wide, unreadable eyes. Some cried, others giggled and whispered behind cupped hands. None would speak to her directly. Once, a toddler reached toward her, then suddenly screamed, pointing to something behind her that wasn't there. And the forest never stopped watching. Even from her window, she could see it, the way the branches bent slightly inward toward the village, as if listening. Sometimes she saw figures, not people, not beasts, shapes, moving between trees, watching her room, waiting. It was on the 4th morning that the wolf came, not in body, not yet, in dreams. Liora stood at the edge of the wailing forest, barefoot and bleeding from one foot. Her hands were raw, stained with soot. The red shawl floated before her, hovering in the air like a spectre. From the trees emerged a creature. It looked like a wolf, only in the loosest sense. Its legs were too long. Its ribs moved independently. Its mouth stretched wide enough to unhinge. And from its throat came a voice that wasn't its own. A voice that was hers. "Give it back," it growled. Liora woke screaming. By the 6th day, she began seeing the symbols from the trees in her waking world, carved into doors, scratched into her floorboards, etched in the frost on her window. The crescent pierced by bone, the red eye, the inverted branch. When she asked her mother what they meant, her mother dropped a pot and did not respond. That night, Liora saw her mother burning something in the hearth, pages torn from a book, pieces of cloth, and something small with teeth. The dreams intensified. The wolf was always there now, sometimes speaking in riddles, sometimes simply watching her from the trees. Once it stood in the clearing of her dream and tore off its own skin, revealing a human face underneath. Her own face. She woke gasping. There were claw marks on her bedroom wall. One afternoon, the bell rang in the village square, a rare thing. It meant a traveller. A man had arrived, tall, cloaked, face partially shadowed beneath a weathered hood. He carried no horse, no cart, only a blackwood staff, wrapped with bone. He asked to speak to the head woman. He didn't smile. He said his name was Elias, and he said He was a hunter. Liora watched from behind the edge of a market stall, her fingers clenched so tightly around a basket handle that it cracked. Elias turned, as though sensing her gaze, and looked directly at her. He did not blink. That night, she found him at the tavern, seated alone, eating nothing. He stared into his mug, like it held the secrets of the world. "Who are you hunting?" she asked, though her voice came out quieter than intended. He glanced at her. His eyes were pale grey, like winter ash. "I'm not hunting," he said. "I'm watching." "Watching for what?" He leaned in. "The one who wears red." Her heart stopped. "I'm not," she began. He smiled faintly. "Not now, but you were, and you will be again. The forest has your scent now." She tried to back away, but he caught her wrist, gently, yet firmly. "Do you know what that shawl is made of?" he asked. She shook her head. "Thread," he said, "soaked in the blood of first daughters. Every wearer leaves a piece of themselves behind. It weaves them into the forest. That's why it only fits you. That's why it called you." Liora's breath hitched. Why would anyone create something like that? "They didn't," Elias said. "They bargained for it, long ago, with something that doesn't forget, something that eats." He released her wrist. "The shawl is alive and hungry, and it's not done with you yet." Liora returned home in a daze. She dug through every drawer, chest, and hidden alcove in the house. Finally, behind a loose panel beneath the stairs, she found it. A book bound in dried petals and thin leather, unlabelled. Inside were sketches, symbols, diagrams of plants, spells, names crossed out violently, and a page torn from the back, stuffed behind the binding. A letter. It was in her mother's handwriting. "I didn't mean for this to happen again. I thought we broke it when I refused the path. But the forest doesn't forget. It waited, and now it's her. Gods forgive me." The rest was smeared in something dark. That night, Liora did not sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the forest. It stared back. A shape moved between the trees, tall, hunched, shifting unnaturally. It turned toward her. 2 red eyes blinked open, far too high above the ground. And in her mind, she heard the voice again. "Give it back." The village held its breath the next morning. Not that anyone said it aloud. No, they went about their chores with mechanical precision. Bread was baked, firewood chopped, water drawn, but no laughter rang from the square. No children played near the edge of the forest, and the bell did not ring once. Liora walked through it all in silence. Her fingers curled tight around the letter she'd found, now folded into her sleeve. She couldn't bear to look at it again, not yet. The ink had bled, but not from time, from tears. Her mother had cried when she wrote it, and that alone frightened Liora more than any red-eyed thing in the woods. She stopped by the weaver's cottage. A square of red fabric hung on the line. A mistake, surely. But the moment she looked at it, it snapped free in the breeze and vanished. No one else seemed to notice. She went home. Her mother wasn't there. The cottage was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that sucks in sound like a black hole. Liora called her mother's name once, then again louder, No reply. The hearth was cold, the kitchen untouched. The shawl was missing from the drawer. Her heart dropped. She ran. The wailing forest no longer tried to hide its hunger. It breathed around her, groaning branches, shifting roots, a pulse that beat beneath the moss. Fog hugged the path like a second skin. The carved symbols on the trees glowed faintly red now, as though feeding on her presence. The crescent and bone, the red eye, the inverted branch. She felt the shawl's absence like an itch beneath her ribs. She knew, somehow, her mother had taken it, and that meant the forest was awake again. The deeper she went, the stranger it became. She passed a tree that bled from its bark, dark and slow. Beneath it, a rabbit lay unmoving, its eyes open, blank. Around its neck was a red thread. She passed a patch of mushrooms shaped like teeth. She passed a mirror hanging from a low branch. It reflected nothing. Then she saw the path split. One trail went left, clean and lit by weak sunlight. The other dipped into shadow. She didn't hesitate. She went into the dark. The cottage was waiting. It looked the same as before. Leaning roof, thorny vines, crooked chimney. But the light inside was darker now, flickering, unstable. The windows did not reflect the trees, only showed flickers of movement that didn't match what stood outside. Liora approached the door. It opened before she could knock. Inside it was dim and red and filled with a smell like overripe fruit. Her eyes adjusted slowly. "Mother," she called. A shape stirred by the hearth. Grandmother sat in her rocking chair. She wore the red shawl now, draped over her thin frame like a crown. Her mouth spread into a too wide grin, revealing far too many teeth, some human, some not. Her eyes gleamed. "You've returned," she purred. "How lovely, but you've come alone, again." "Where's my mother?" Liora asked, stepping closer. Grandmother's rocking stopped. "You think she'd survive another offering? The forest remembers her betrayal. She refused her path, remember? Left a hole in the tapestry. Someone had to fill it, someone pure." "I'm not pure," Liora snapped. Grandmother laughed. "No, not anymore." Liora's hand went to her sleeve, where the letter hid. "You took something from me," she said. "What was it?" "A kindness," Grandmother replied. "A memory, a heartbeat. Does it matter?" "It does to me." Grandmother leaned forward. Her teeth clicked as she grinned. "You still don't understand. You came into the woods a girl. You left wearing a hole, a space the forest could wear like a mask. That's what the shawl is, a key. It opens you. It lets the old things in." She stood. Her legs were too long. Her shadow stretched across the floor like liquid. "Would you like to see what's inside you now?" Liora stepped back. The shadows behind Grandmother rippled. Shapes moved there, faces half-formed, limbs writhing like snakes in a pit. She saw her own reflection there, distorted. She looked older, and her eyes were yellow. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you are strong," Grandmother said. "And the forest grows hungry." A second voice rose from the fire. "Give it back." The flames twisted. A shape stepped out, tall, sinewy, half wolf, half smoke. It had no mouth, only teeth, no eyes, only fire. It moved toward her, snarling low. Liora turned and ran. The forest closed behind her, branches lashing, roots clutching at her feet. Thorns ripped her skin. Whispers chased her through the fog. She's leaving. Stop her. Break her bones and feed the roots. Little red, bring us your head. She stumbled and fell into a pit of leaves and landed on something soft. Her mother, unmoving, eyes open, bloodless lips. The shawl was wrapped around her neck like a garrote. Liora screamed, but her mother blinked just once. Liora dragged her out. The forest did not resist. In fact, it parted for her, as if curious what she'd do next. They collapsed at the edge of the village at dawn. No one was there to greet them, not a soul. Her mother did not speak for 2 days. When she finally did, her voice was hoarse. I tried to break it, she said. I thought if I gave myself, it would spare you. But the forest doesn't want sacrifice. It wants lineage. Liora sat beside her, watching the fire. I saw her, she whispered. I saw grandmother's true form. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. So did I. Once, that night, Liora took the shawl and buried it behind the cottage. But when she woke the next morning, it was back in the drawer, folded, waiting. The shawl would not stay buried. Liora tried again the next day, wrapped it in stone, tossed it into the river, where the current ran cold and fast. She watched it sink, watched it vanish beneath the surface. The next morning, it lay folded at the foot of her bed, dry, still warm. She burned it that night, held it with tongs over the hearth, eyes locked on the flame. It writhed as if alive, curling in on itself. It screamed, high and shrill, like a baby's wail, then turned to ash. She swept the ashes outside into the wind. By dawn, the shawl was draped across her shoulders, and this time she hadn't put it there. The village grew stranger by the day. People began forgetting her name. The blacksmith called her girl. The seamstress didn't recognize her at all. Children no longer stared. They walked around her like she wasn't there, like a space in the world their eyes couldn't register. Only Elias still saw her. He appeared again one evening as she sat by the well, hands in her lap, staring at nothing. He approached slowly, casting no shadow. They won't remember you for long, he said. The red makes you a ghost. I thought it made me a sacrifice, she muttered. He sat across from her. No, that was always the lie. You're not meant to die. You're meant to open. To what? To it. Elias told her stories that night. Tales not passed down in the village. Stories of the old woods, older than maps, older than names. Of the red veil. A fragment of something vast and ravenous. A hunger that once wore the skin of gods. When the veil was torn during some forgotten war, it drifted like smoke, seeping into the earth, the trees, the minds of those desperate enough to listen. A village once struck a bargain to survive famine, to bear children, to remember no wars. The forest gave them peace in exchange for daughters. The shawl was its token, not a gift, a brand. They think it's a ritual, Elias said, but it's not. It's a wound. Liora returned home that night with her fist clenched and her teeth grinding. She was done being afraid. She pulled out the book again, the one with spells and scrawled warnings, and began to read it with new eyes. Not with fear, with fury. She traced the glyphs she had seen in her dreams, found pages on severing bonds, on blood rituals, on mirrors and memory. One page described something called the echo rite, a spell for speaking to the pieces of oneself that had been taken. She gathered what was needed. She waited for night. The forest was silent as she stepped into its edge, this time with purpose. She wore the shawl. She didn't fight it. She followed the crooked path until she found the stone with the crescent carving. The bark nearby wept red sap. She knelt and drew the glyphs in a circle. Salt, mirror, hair, fire. She lit the candle, and then she spoke. Show me what you took. The mirror clouded, then cleared, and Liora saw herself, but not quite. A version of her with brighter eyes, a laughing mouth, a warmth she had forgotten. Her reflection smiled. Do you remember? It asked. Liora shook her head. Your father's voice, the story he told before he died, the song you used to hum while drawing. You gave all that away. Tears pricked her eyes. Why? Because you trusted them, because you wore the red, because you were taught to. The reflection reached out, hand pressing flat against the glass. Liora mirrored the gesture. I want them back, she whispered. You can't have all of it, the reflection said, but you can take one piece. A single memory rose, her father's face, laughing, lifting her into the air as the snow fell. She clung to it. The mirror cracked. She staggered home, the memory seared behind her eyes. She held it tight, repeating it again and again until the dawn. The shawl tightened around her shoulders as she lay in bed, but this time it didn't hum with heat. It pulsed with confusion. The next day, she found claw marks on her door, 3 long scratches, deep, fresh. She found tufts of black fur on her windowsill. That night, something howled at the edge of the village, long and mournful. The villagers heard it, but none of them opened their doors. Elias found her again the following evening. He stood by the tree with the bleeding bark. You're stirring it, he said. It's waking up. It doesn't like when they remember. I don't care, she said. He handed her a dagger made of bone. The handle was wrapped in black thread. Next time it comes, he said, don't run. She didn't wait long. The wolf came the following night, not in a dream, not in whispers, in flesh. It stood at the foot of her bed, towering, hunched, its eyes glowing from beneath the hood of shadows, its jaw unhinged, and a voice spilled from its throat. You're opening wrong. It lunged. She rolled aside, grabbing the dagger. The wolf's claws missed her by inches, raking gouges into the wooden wall. She slashed at its flank. Bone met smoke, then flesh. It howled, shuddering violently as something split from its side and fell to the ground. A face, a human face, her face. Blood poured from it like ink. The wolf recoiled, shrinking back, whimpering. Then it looked at her and spoke again, this time with her voice. Let me back in. Liora stood over the face, dagger still raised. You don't belong to me, she said. Not anymore. She turned and walked to the hearth. The wolf didn't follow. She threw the face into the flames. It screamed. The shawl tightened again, this time so hard it choked her. She fell to her knees, gasping. The cloth twisted, fighting her, but she grabbed it, dug her nails in, and pulled. It tore, not just fabric. Something screamed from inside it. The wolf howled outside, then silence. She woke on the floor the next morning. The shawl was gone, but something had changed in her reflection. Her eyes were red. The shawl was gone, but not the hunger. Liora felt it gnawing at her from the inside, a quiet, constant ache in her chest, as though something hollow had taken root behind her ribs. Her dreams were quieter now, but stranger. No more wolves with flaming eyes. No more grandmother with her impossible teeth. Instead, she stood in fields of ash, while mouths bloomed from the ground. They whispered lullabies she almost remembered. When she woke, her gums were bleeding. She smiled into the mirror just to check. Her teeth were still hers, mostly. The village had changed, not just in the way it looked at her, though even fewer eyes met hers now, but in subtle, uncanny ways. The fog lingered longer. Chickens lay black eggs. The well water shimmered faintly red when drawn at dawn. No birds sang, and one morning a girl named Elsbeth went missing, only 9 years old. Her mother swore she was just beside her. 1 second talking, the next gone. The child's shoes were still on the path. No tracks, no sound, nothing, except a single red thread hanging from a tree nearby. Liora found it first. She brought it to Elias. He unspooled it slowly, eyes narrowing. She never wore the shawl, he said. She wasn't of age. That doesn't matter anymore, Liora replied. It's hungry. He nodded grimly. It's skipping ahead. Or maybe it's not just about age, she said. Maybe it's about purity, vulnerability, innocence. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. Then we need to find it, she said, before the forest takes her whole. He shook his head. It already has her. If she's marked, she's inside it now. You can't pull someone out. Liora's hand tightened into a fist. Then I'll go in. Elias followed. They packed offerings, rootwork charms, iron nails, stones soaked in ash. Not because they believed they would protect them, but because it gave their hands something to hold when their minds began to bend. They left at dusk. The forest met them like an open mouth. The wailing forest welcomed Liora this time. The fog parted, the path lit with soft red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The trees groaned in recognition. The symbols carved into the trunks now glowed steadily. They walked in silence until the first sign, a rag doll hanging from a branch, its eyes gouged out, its mouth sewn shut with red thread. Liora stopped. She had a doll like that, she whispered. Elias reached for it, but it crumbled to ash in his hand. Further along, they found a shoe, then a ribbon, then something worse, a child's drawing nailed to a tree, a family, a house, a girl in red, a figure with sharp teeth behind her, and beneath it, carved with something jagged, she fed us, so will you. They reached the clearing again. The cottage was different now. It pulsed, it breathed. Thorns around it had grown, twisting in shapes that mimicked ribs and hands. Smoke coiled from the chimney, black and slow. The windows flickered with shadows, too large to belong to anyone inside. The door creaked open before they touched it. The smell of decay poured out. Inside, the walls had changed. They were made of teeth, tiny teeth, children's teeth, embedded in bark and root. The floor writhed beneath their feet. On the far wall, a shape hung suspended in web-like thread. Elsbeth, unmoving, eyes closed, mouth open slightly, whispers spilling from her lips though no breath moved. Elias moved toward her. Liora grabbed his arm. "She's speaking," she said. He listened. The words were in a language neither of them had learned, but both understood. "Bring the girl in red. Feed the forest. Take her back." Elias reached for his knife, but then Liora heard her name, not from Elsbeth, from the fire. Grandmother sat in the hearth, curled among coals like a queen in her throne. "You've returned," she said, smiling wide, "as I knew you would." Liora stepped forward. "You took a child," she said. "That wasn't the deal." "There was never a deal," Grandmother hissed. "Only tradition, only hunger. Do you think your village is safe because it's special? No, it is safe because it is obedient." "You're killing them," Liora said. "I'm preserving them. Better to feed a few than let the rest rot in chaos. That is the way of the woods, the way of the veil." Liora looked at the child. Elsbeth's skin had begun to grey. "She's not dead," Elias whispered, "but she's fading." "Then help me," Liora said. He stepped back. "I can't." The forest shifted. The walls cracked. Hands reached through them, long, jointed, bark-covered. They clawed at Elias, pulled him back. He screamed once before vanishing into the wall of teeth. Liora ran, but not out, deeper. She followed a corridor made of roots and bone. It led downward into the earth, into a place that didn't exist on any map. It smelled of milk teeth and old blood. It echoed with crying. She found a chamber at the bottom, and in it, herself, the girl from the mirror, brighter, younger, laughing. She sat cross-legged, humming a lullaby Liora didn't remember learning. The red shawl was wrapped around her like a blanket. "I've missed you," the girl said. "I'm not yours," Liora replied. "You were. You can be again." She extended the shawl. Liora stepped forward, then stabbed the dagger into the floor. The entire chamber screamed. The ground split. The girl vanished, and the shawl turned to smoke. When she surfaced, the cottage was gone. So was Elias. So was Elsbeth. The forest stood still, and in her hand, Liora held one baby tooth, shining with red light. She placed it in her pocket and walked home. The tooth glowed softly for 3 days. Liora kept it in a velvet pouch beneath her pillow, where it pulsed like a heartbeat in the dark. She didn't sleep much, not because she feared dreams, but because the forest had started whispering, even in the daylight. The trees no longer waited for her to come to them. They reached. Vines curled along the village fences. Roots clawed their way out of the earth like fingers. Birds began dropping dead mid-flight, their hollow bodies falling silently into wells and window boxes. No one spoke of it, because no one remembered it. Only Liora and her mother seemed untouched by the forgetting. Her mother grew weaker each day, shadows deepening under her eyes, her voice quieter with each passing sentence. She no longer left the house, barely ate. When Liora asked what she remembered of her own walk through the forest, she only shook her head and wept. "I never finished it," she whispered. "I ran, but the forest, it doesn't lose." Liora held her hand. "It hasn't won yet." She buried the tooth beneath the old ash tree behind their cottage. She marked the grave with a rune from the spell book, an unbinding symbol meant to sever ties between soul and soil. That night, it snowed for the first time in 20 years. In spring, on the 4th night, she heard the voice again. But it wasn't the wolf. It wasn't grandmother. It was the girl. "You took the tooth. Now take the rest." Liora woke to find the shawl lying beside her, whole, unburned. She didn't scream. She didn't throw it in the fire. She put it on. This time, she didn't walk into the forest. She stepped into it, and the trees bowed. The ground rippled beneath her feet like water. Branches shifted to form arches overhead. Flowers bloomed and rotted in the same breath. Time hiccuped. Stars blinked in the middle of the day. The forest wasn't just awake, it was listening, and it was afraid. She returned to the clearing. No cottage stood there now, only a throne, made of bone and antlers, woven through with red thread. Blood pooled beneath it, soaking into the ground and feeding the roots. Flies buzzed lazily in the thick air. Grandmother sat on the throne. Her form shifted endlessly, now a crone, now a child, now something skeletal and beast-like. Her teeth remained the same, too many. "You come draped in defiance," she said, "but the red belongs to me." "I'm not here to bargain," Liora said. "I'm here to end it." Grandmother smiled. "So was I once." The forest closed behind them. Liora stepped into the circle around the throne, marked by stones that pulsed with ancient runes. "The veil is fraying," she said. "You feel it?" "Of course I do," Grandmother replied. "It's inside me. It's inside you. You wear it like a skin. I tore it off, but it left its mark." Liora raised her hand. The runes on her fingers, burned there during the ritual, flared to life. The throne groaned. "You've bound yourself to the forest," Grandmother whispered. "You've made a pact. You think you're breaking the curse, but you're only becoming the next vessel." "I know," Liora said, and she smiled. From the trees the wolf emerged, not a beast this time, a man, Elias. His eyes were black, his arms covered in red thread, embedded into his skin. He moved like someone held by invisible strings. "You should have let me go," he said. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He lunged. They fought beneath the shadow of the throne. The shawl twisted around her limbs like armor, like flame, like wrath incarnate. It was no longer a tool. It was her second skin. She let it in. The dagger met Elias's throat. He fell, and from him spilled hundreds of teeth, tiny, milk white. They rolled toward the throne and stopped at Grandmother's feet. She bent slowly to pick one up, then frowned. "They're not bound." "No," Liora said. "They're mine now." From her pocket, she pulled the pouch. The tooth she'd buried had returned, whole, glowing brighter than ever. She threw it into the throne's centre. The red threads ignited. The bone cracked. Grandmother screamed, not in pain but in rage, in betrayal, in the sound of something ancient being torn from the world it claimed to own. The forest convulsed, trees screamed, wind became voice. She is not yours, she is not ours, she is only silence. When Liora opened her eyes, she was alone. The throne was ash, the shawl was gone, so was grandmother, and Elias. She walked out of the forest. The path remained clear, clean, welcoming. The village remembered her again. They did not understand what had happened, but they no longer looked past her. They spoke her name. They brought her bread. Children played near her feet. One of them, Elspeth, smiled up at her and offered her a flower. "You smell like the woods," the girl said. Liora smiled back. "I suppose I do." That night, the moon was full. Liora stood at the edge of the forest, fingers brushing the bark of the old ash tree. She heard no whispers, no cries, no teeth, only wind, only peace. And yet she stayed awake, because something in her still pulsed, because the shawl had vanished. But not the hunger. It began with the flowers. They bloomed too brightly that spring, scarlet and gold, growing in spirals along the village paths where no seeds had been sown. The elders called it a blessing, but Liora knew better, because those same flowers had grown once, in the shadow of grandmother's throne. The petals were warm to the touch, and if she pressed one between her fingers, it bled. Liora was changing, not outwardly. Her reflection still showed the same face, tired, pale, her eyes a little darker than they used to be, but inside something stirred. She no longer feared the forest. She no longer feared the dreams. She was the dreams. She stopped locking her door at night. She started hearing things others couldn't. Heartbeat beneath soil, sighs in the wind, the soft shuffle of bone in the walls of old cottages. She could tell when someone lied. She could taste their fear, and always at the edge of her mind, the tug, the hunger. She avoided the forest for as long as she could, but the forest didn't avoid her. One morning, she woke to find a red line drawn in salt across her doorstep. A warning, or a message, or both. The same day, 3 crows perched on her roof and refused to leave. They followed her everywhere, cawing only when she passed the well. That evening, the well water turned red. No one else noticed. Liora began seeing faces in the fog. Not wolves, not grandmother, children. Dozens of them, pale and perfect, mouths sewn shut, eyes pleading. They stood in her dreams, with their arms raised like broken dolls. They pointed toward the forest, toward a hunger left unfinished, and she realized she had only torn one root from the tree. The rest still slumbered, still fed, still waited. The book held the answer. She had buried it after her last return, but now she dug it up, pages damp, spine warped, still humming faintly with the spell work carved into its margins. The final chapters were ones she'd never dared read, the ones marked in blood. They spoke of the hood beneath the world, a creature, not a person, not a god, but a force bound in red. The first hunger, the first taking, a spirit of consumption that had slipped through cracks in the veil between life and root, flesh and soil. It couldn't die, but it could be worn, and it had chosen her. She tried to warn the village, but the words didn't come out right. They looked at her with pity, with distance, with fear. Even her mother avoided her now, watched her like something wild might snap. She left food by the door, but never entered. Liora didn't blame her. Sometimes she didn't feel human anymore either. Elias came back on the 7th night, or something wearing him did. She saw him by the ash tree where she buried the tooth. He didn't speak, just watched her with hollow eyes. She approached slowly, heart hammering. "I saw you die," she whispered. He didn't blink. She reached out. He whispered, "The hood wears the wolf." Then he crumbled. Bones first, then ash, then nothing. And in the place where he stood, another red thread. That night, the shawl returned, folded neatly at the foot of her bed. This time, she didn't burn it. She didn't bury it. She put it on, and the hunger welcomed her home. She dreamed of her own mouth, stretching wider, cracking at the edges. Inside were not teeth, but voices, dozens of them, all crying, laughing, pleading, all her own. She woke with blood on her pillow. She had bitten her tongue nearly in half. The final ritual was written in charcoal and tears, scrawled into the back cover of the book. To silence the hood, one must walk into the moor and close it from within. It wasn't clear what the moor was, but Liora knew. The forest, the original clearing, the place that had no name, where the throne had stood, where the pact had begun. She left at midnight. No basket, no blade, only the shawl, only her voice. The wailing forest opened like a mouth, swallowing her whole. She didn't follow the path. She walked where the trees leaned thickest, where the moss was softest, where the ground pulsed like flesh. Eventually she found it, not a clearing, but a circle, an ancient hollow in the earth where the grass no longer grew. The air shimmered like heat, though the night was cold. In the centre, a ring of teeth. Liora stepped into it. The earth sighed, and from the ground a shape rose, a red hood, empty, waiting. She knelt and wore it. Her mind vanished first. Memories fled like birds. Her name, her mother's face, the taste of snow, then her body. She felt it stretch, bend, dissolve. Her arms became roots. Her hair became thread. Her skin turned to bark. But her hunger remained. It whispered, "Take only what is given, but ask for everything." And so she asked. She opened her mouth, and the forest listened. For 3 days, the forest fell silent. No wind stirred its branches. No creatures crept beneath its canopy. Even the moss held its breath. The villagers noticed. They whispered of Liora, but only in fragments, half sentences, unfinished thoughts. Her name felt heavy on the tongue. Some remembered her clearly. Others only saw her as a shadow, a suggestion in red. No one saw her leave. No one saw her return. And yet, there were footprints, bare, small, and burned into the ground like soot. They led from the edge of the woods to her door. Liora no longer slept. She sat by the hearth, eyes open, unmoving. The fire didn't flicker in her presence. The shadows refused to approach. The shawl was no longer red. It was darker now, maroon, almost black, woven through with strands of silver and bone. When she spoke, the house listened. When she walked, the floorboards creaked, not in protest, but in reverence. And at night, the hunger within her stirred like a second heart. It whispered in languages the villagers had forgotten, in lullabies made of teeth and thread. The forest knew her now as kin. The trees no longer tried to ensnare her. They leaned back, clearing her path. The symbols carved into their trunks dimmed when she passed, as if bowing their heads. In the deepest part of the woods, something ancient watched and did not interfere. She had passed the trial. She had not conquered the hunger. She had become it. Her mother wept when Liora returned. She held her daughter close, though the skin beneath her hands no longer felt entirely like skin. Liora did not cry. She pressed her forehead to her mother's and whispered, "It's over now." But that was a lie, and they both knew it. Elsbeth began to dream again. She awoke one night screaming, claiming a woman in red had stood at the foot of her bed, whispering stories into her ear. They weren't scary, she insisted, but they hurt. Liora visited her the next morning, offered her tea, sweetened with nettle and sugar root. She did not ask about the dreams, but she left a sprig of wolfsbane at the windowsill when she departed. Liora walked the village now in silence. She mended fences, whispered to crops, touched sick lambs, and watched them recover overnight. She never smiled. The villagers began to refer to her in hushed tones. The red one, the hooded girl, lady of the thorns, daughter of the forest. She did not correct them. She no longer remembered if she had a name. Not truly. Children followed her sometimes, drawn like moths to warmth they didn't understand. She told them stories when the moon was high, twisted fairy tales, filled with broken promises, cursed objects, and hungry woods. They listened with wide eyes, and when they left, she gave each of them a charm, a button, a feather, a nail. "Keep it close," she would say, "and never enter the woods alone." She visited the ash tree once more, the grave where the tooth had been buried. The runes had faded, the roots were bare. Beneath them something new had begun to grow, a flower, dark red, shimmering with threads of silver. She knelt and touched it. It opened like a mouth. Inside a single tooth sat gleaming. She left it there. That night, the wolves howled again for the first time in years. Not in fear, in welcome. The forest pulsed with life, not hungry now but fed, not quiet now but calm. Liora stood at the edge of the woods, eyes glowing faintly. She understood. The hunger would never leave, but she could shape it. She could feed it with balance, not blood. And should another daughter walk the path, she would be waiting. In time, the villagers forgot the old stories, forgot the names of the lost girls, forgot the price that had been paid for their peace. But in every generation, a child would dream of a red veil, of a girl with no eyes but 1,000 mouths, of a forest that breathed. And when that dream came, a tooth would appear beneath their pillow, white as milk, red as memory. And Liora, she waited, in shadow, in root, in the red that never faded. She was no longer prey, no longer girl. She was the hood, and she was hungry.